Reintroducing new approaches to building and architecture allows us to reintroduce variety, which can create the sort of true community that I think we're like missing and longing for.
The fundamental element of restructuring the way we live is about community. But the sense of community is not just with people. The sense of community is with the earth.
If we look at the history of individualism, it's only the last couple of hundred years that the solitary, self-sufficient human has come into being. It's beyond overwhelming to think that we birthed a civilization where a single human is solely responsible for themselves, for the work that they do, for the food that they eat, and for the impact on the planet. I mean, to me, this is evidence of a crisis looming large. The crisis is that of isolation. If we zoom out just a little bit, the entire history of humanity is ripe with the formation of tribes, city-states, village councils, and a million different ways of organizing a collectivized society. A community is a safe space. It's a container in which the individual can develop strong sense of belonging and can be most useful to that place, to their neighbors, their land, their way of life. And when our community extends not only to the people around us, but to the nature that supports us and to the whole planet, that's when magic starts to happen. That's when we glimpse infinity and surrender to the eternal collective consciousness. Nikita Valero has a great quote. Shouting self-care at people who need community care is how we fail people. Amidst this crisis of isolation, we've gotten really good at telling people that they need to fix themselves, when in fact, much of individual strife is a product of an absence of a support system, a missing of community. Jason Ballard, founder of Icon, is someone that is using 3D printing technology to print homes so that not only can we solve the housing crisis, but we can do it in a way that spawns dignity within communities of people from all walks of life. It's about creating a confluence of diversity so that people in the community can learn from one another, no matter how different they think they are.
We good to go? Finally got Jason Ballard in the hot seat. Welcome to Earth Speed. So tell us a little bit about what you've been up to.
The feeling I have is that housing should be abundant, and that we should be sheltering ourselves in ways that don't ruin the ecological health of the world that we live on. Those are sort of just like the basic ideas.
Sounds fair.
No controversy so far. And it turns out that neither of those things is true right now. We simply do not have enough dignified human shelter on the planet. And I'm not talking about like a few dozen short, we're talking about like millions of homes short. And the ways that we are building, the environmental costs are not bearable. And it feels, in some sense, like by 2022, we ought to be the most advanced versions of ourselves. The most advanced Homo sapien civilization should be now. But we're not doing shelter right, which is weird because it's like on the like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like food, water, shelter. It feels like we should have nailed those by now, and we haven't. The romantic thesis is like in the future, neighborhoods and towns and ultimately cities will be built by robots and drones, and that future is more equitable, more sustainable, more full of beauty and design thinking, more affordable, sort of all the things we want out of our housing. So that's the revolution that's underway at Icon. And so we've gotten mostly known for construction scale 3D printing buildings and homes. And it keeps us busy because it's a pretty challenging set of technical hurdles to overcome.
So this is Konsugi, and Konsugi comes from the Japanese word, which means to mend broken pottery with gold. Not looking for perfection, but looking to honor and appreciate the parts of us that have been wounded or hurt or scarred.
I was recently at a talk in Miami where I was fortunate enough to hear Queen Diambi speak. I gravitated to her afterwards, and it was a pure resonance of souls. I didn't need to define what Earth Speed is to her. She knew it. She has always known it and lived by it. She believes that when we move to the rhythm of the earth and honor its speed, we remove ourselves from the center and instead place the collective at the heart of everything.
Welcome, Queen Diambi.
Thank you for welcoming me.
Welcome to Earth Speed. You have some experience in governance and leadership and community building.
A community for me is really where the whole piece lies in, because in my villages, most of the things belong to the community. So there's no doors with locks and everything. So when you are not using something, it's okay somebody else uses that thing. So that principle of sharing, like Uber, I remember growing up in Kinshasa, and Uber already existed. It wasn't called Uber, but anybody who had a car could share the rides with anybody else. And that person would ask for a payment, and then that person, you would pay directly to the owner of the car, the driver, and that was the Uber, because that's how we did it. So when I came then to the West in Europe, the first time I went, I was about 13 years old to settle, and that's what the first thing that struck me, is that we are separate. It's you and you and you and you, everybody's separate. And everybody's working with their own little space for their own personal gain. And we never ask the question, if I do gain this, how is that going to impact the next door neighbor or the next kid or something? So for me, the fundamental element of restructuring the way we live is about community. But the sense of community is not just with people. The sense of community is with the earth.
Yeah, so, and you could just put up a bunch of privacy and just pretend like you're living in the wild and that they don't exist. But, we learn stuff from each other. We want to intermix. We want to commingle, at least share experiences, invite people in, give them access to our organic, beautiful, healthy food. Instead of going to Starbucks, they can come here and have organic.
Starbucks no good anyway.
Yeah, exactly. I've been doing sustainable building for a long time. It's extremely expensive.
Yes.
It's really hard.
Yes.
It's not accessible to most people. So it's more of this aspirational idea, but it's not a tangible thing for most people.
Correct.
And so you leave a lot of people out of the equation. And then, of course, people who don't have homes at all, they're not looking for sustainable, they're just looking for a roof over their head.
Yeah. Winston Churchill had this wonderful quote, "First we shape our buildings, and thereafter they shape us." The architectures that we deliver in the world have a profound relationship to our own experience of the world and our own experience of community. And if you walked around Austin and you went to your very favorite neighborhoods in Austin and you said, what makes these places special and unique? There's a lot of things you'd pick up, but one of the things is there's this sense that the people who actually wanted to live there had an outsized voice in what would get built. And so why did we quit building that way? For a lot of reasons it would be a long time to get into right now, like housing costs started rising. And as we started trying to push back against rising housing costs, where we got was standardization. Because with the way that the current building materials and systems that we use, any changes create new costs. And so you started trying to make the world look very monochrome in order to, actually for very good reasons. You were trying to solve affordability. The negative effect is you get these what are now called cookie cutter developments, and cookie cutter is not a compliment in this sense. And so what 3D printing enables us to do is actually turn back a little bit of the clock there. You can change the style, shape, layout, plans of a home without changing cost. We could 3D print 100 homes in a row, and all 100 can be different, and they're more or less the same price to print per square foot. Reintroducing new approaches to building and architecture allows us to reintroduce variety, which can create the sort of true community that I think we're like missing and longing for right now. Because right now you hear about things like retirement communities where like all the old people live over there, and you'll have like more affordable communities, which is more or less people in the same age and stage of life. But that's not rich community. You want the young and the old and people new at their work and people who've been at their work for a long time. You want them all living and working together because we have lessons to teach each other. We have things to learn from and discover about each other. And if we're only sort of living and working around people who are carbon copies of ourselves, we're just sort of looking in a mirror all day. And that's no way to build community. And so the hope is by reintroducing diversity in architecture and diversity in the things that we build, we could reintroduce diversity into community, and that diversity would help create true community. I know that's the real hope.
Permaculture,
Yeah.
lesson number 10 is use and value diversity.
Yes.
And you see that on the land. When you bring multiple different factors at play, you actually are more creative, you're more resilient, you can actually invent more stability.
Yeah, nature never creates monoculture.
Right.
And I think human societies have always flourished the most when we're all mixed up together a little bit. That sparks creativity, it sparks a broadness of perspective and understanding, and that's the kind of thing I think we should be after.
So it's almost like a never-ending chase to fulfill or to soothe a sentiment of not being enough. And that's for me where the disconnection comes, and that's for me where community can abridge that. Because see, I am a good dancer, but I cannot sing, I cannot do any music, I'm a good cook. So all the attributes that I can bring in with everybody else can complete us. When you have an understanding of that, then you are humble, you are happy to be who you are, you know that you can contribute. At the same time, you know that you depend. And that interdependence is okay. To not be enough in the sense that I may not master every field, and it's okay because somebody else in my community does and can be basically my technology for me to expand myself, kind of, because that's what technology is. It's like a tool so you can expand. So we are each other's technology.
We're sort of fighting the war of what's largely called the housing crisis. It's sort of a multi-front war. One of the big fights is with regard to just simply provide housing to those that don't have it. And I think one of the leaders, at least in Texas, of these efforts, and I think their model is one that should be studied and applied more widely, is Community First Village. They provide permanent housing to people, but more importantly, they provide community to people. And so a portion of the people who live in the community are not experiencing chronic homelessness. They just volunteered to live and to create community alongside those who have experienced chronic homelessness in their life. And the results have been astounding. And so we've built 7 houses out there for them so far. What they discovered with those first 7 houses is we could create very dignified housing. And then on top of that, because we're using a resilient building material, the houses are easier to maintain and operate. And so they're really loving what they've experienced. And so they've signed up for a lot more houses. So one of the big projects we have coming up is delivering a lot more houses for people experiencing chronic homelessness in Austin, but specifically for them to live in community.
We are nature with the community of all things of nature. It provides a sense of safety. And I believe that on the opposite, the model that's telling us to go into the rat race is a model that provides a sense of insecurity. But the sense of community is not just with people. The sense of community is with the earth. We are a community with this earth, with this planet. We are a community with the trees. We are a community with the stones. We are a community with all these insects and all these animals that are doing a job to allow this planet to be habitable for us.
Rabindranath Tagore said, "The one who plants trees knowing he will never sit in their shade has at least started to understand the meaning of life." And there we go. That's what a community is. That's what a community can accomplish. The eternal progression of the human spirit in a land filled with blessings. We come from a lineage of great ancestors, and for the sake of those that will come after us, we must strive to also be great ancestors. So let's pledge to end the crisis of isolation and come together in community, in harmony, and let our legacy be one of hope and abundance. What do you say? Let's do it together.